Hi, this is Dawn Peterson, and this screencast is called Writing for the Web, Improving User Experience by Writing the Way They Read. How users read on the web. They don't. Think about it. How do you read a web page? Do you read it word for word from top to bottom? I'm guessing no. Instead, what we do is scan. We scan the page, we pick out individual words and sentences that have something meaningful in them to us. So, if you write text that is scannable, your users will read their page faster. They're going to retain your message better. They're going to have a better experience on your site. They're going to stay longer, come back more often, and you're going to build trust. I first want to introduce you to the idea of the dreaded wall of text. It's a web term for one giant block of writing that is incredibly hard to read or scan, and often there are few, if any, paragraph breaks, no subheadings. So instead, what we want to do is create scannable text. And I have a list of tips. I'm going to go into each one in more detail. We're going to use the inverted pyramid, write simply, limit ourselves to one idea per paragraph, break our texts into lists, use headings and subheadings, and highlight keywords. So let's take a look at each of these. The inverted pyramid. We use this because people decide whether they want to keep reading based on the first sentence or two, so we want to get to the point fast. The inverted pyramid is structuring your text like a triangle that's upside down, with the most newsworthy info at the very top. Our users should be able to get the general idea of the entire article by reading the lead paragraph. The lead paragraph should be only 1 or 2 sentences, 30 to 35 words in total. And that lead paragraph should tell the main who, what, when, where, and or how of the story. You may not get all of those ideas in. Then as we move down the inverted pyramid, we get to content that's progressively less important. Our second paragraph is where we develop some idea that is in the lead. And then in the third paragraph, maybe one other idea, etc. Present information in a decreasing order of importance. So each new paragraph should present the reader with some new information, but it should be tied to the previous paragraph by the skillful use of transitions. Finally, put stuff that's not essential to the user's understanding at the end. Ernest Hemingway said, "It is all very well for you to write simply, and the simpler the better. But do not start to think so damned simply. Know how complicated it is, and then state it simply." So our second tip is write simply. If your text is clear and concise, your users are going to spend less time reading, and that's going to make them happier. Less eye strain, less time spent, etc. Use vocabulary that is easy to follow. And avoid jargon or clever wordplay. If you do need to use jargon, please explain it to everyone. So get to the point quickly by using short words and phrases, and concise paragraphs of 2 to 3 sentences each. You'd want to shoot for about half of the word count you might use for printed text. Take out the fluff, take out the unnecessary, pare down that content to an understandable minimum. In order to do this, you can reduce flowery parts of speech like adjectives and adverbs. It's also important to replace passive phrases with active phrases. And just to make it more legible, never center the text on the page. That does make it harder to read because of the ragged left edge. Now when you're done, reread your copy. If you can't work out what it says, what hope do your users have of understanding it? Also try to limit yourself to one idea per paragraph. This is going to help you stick to shorter chunks of text. It's also going to make those paragraphs a lot easier to scan. And put keywords at the beginning and end of paragraphs where people pay the most attention. And you may not be able to do that for every paragraph, but that's been shown by research to be very effective. I love this tool, Hemingway app, and you'll find it at hemingwayapp.com. You can use their online tool for free. They also have some apps to download that cost a little bit of money. The goal of this tool is to reduce the grade level required to read your text. So I have an example of this about page for the College of the Ouachitas. On the left-hand side, you can see the original text had a grade of 17, which meant you had to be 5 grades beyond high school to be able to read this text. And on the right-hand side, I was able to do a lot of those write simply tips that I gave you. Shorten the sentences, remove some of the jargon, replace it with simpler words, get rid of adverbs and things like that. And for the most part, I replaced passive phrases with active phrases, and I got the score all the way down to grade 10, which would be nice if it was even lower, but that's pretty good. And you can see I got a green bar and it says good there instead of poor. Our third tip is to break text into lists, because lists make the text even more scannable. Think about a big block of text on the page versus lots of little bullet points with a few lines of text after each one. They break up that big block, and it is much easier to scan. It also gives the user's eye something to lock into when they scan the page. I know for myself, if I arrive on an article that has a couple of lists on it and I'm trying to decide whether to read the entire article, I might scan those lists first. So if you find you're using a lot of commas within a sentence, maybe you are listing things. Consider using a bulleted list instead. Here's another case study using Hemingway app. This is a blog post from Scientific American talking about germ transfer via contact using several different kinds of greetings, and you can see I broke them out into a list of 6 here, and I also did some general rewriting of long sentences and some jargon. I brought the grade from 13 down to 7. In WordPress, one of the ways that you can get a bulleted list is just go ahead and separate the list items with a line return like you were separating paragraphs. Then select all those list items together and click the bulleted list button. Our fourth tip is using lots of headings and subheadings, because headings are a great way to make a long sequence of paragraphs easier to scan. The headings announce exactly what the following chunk or chunks of text is about, and it lets your user decide whether they want to invest their time in reading that bit. So some common uses of headings in a site layout. The main site heading appears on every page. This is otherwise known as a site ID. It gives the users context. If they arrived on your page from somewhere else, they can identify what website they're on. Now, this form of heading is usually a logo in the top left corner. Not always, but that is the case on a Sacramento City College website. Sidebar headings kind of group bits of links together in many cases. They let the user know where the links go or why the content is different from the main column. They also break down content into lists. A page heading is typically found above the main content. It announces the topic of the page. It also is one of those wayfinding techniques. If somebody lands in the middle of your site, they not only know what site they're on, but what the page is about. Now, the page heading for our website is entered here in the Add New Page, Enter Title Here field when you create a new page. Now, subheadings, that's what I want to urge you to try to use a lot of, especially when you have a lot of text on your page. They help break up the page into themes or sub-themes. They alert the users to distinct transitions in topic. They point out details of possible interest. And what users are going to do, in addition to scanning lists, is they're going to scan subheadings first to decide what to read and whether to read it at all. It's important to understand when using something that creates HTML in the shadows, that HTML comes with 6 different header levels. Those are H1 through H6, so H2, H3, etc. And the different heading levels are used to signify hierarchy in your content. They're not going sequentially down the page, although at first it may seem like that. A level 1 heading is the most important heading. That's going to be your page title usually. The H2 is going to be the next most important. H3s would fall under an H2, but there might be multiples. And this is where you would select them in your text editing box. You can see it starts out by saying paragraph, but if you drop it down, you have the 6 levels of heading available to you. So as I mentioned, the page heading is already set as heading 1 for the page. So within your body text, start with heading 2 in establishing the hierarchy of the page content. And here's an example of a line of text that is selected as a heading 2. Now, if you need to further divide your content within a section, use heading 3. It's all about hierarchy. On the graphic on the right-hand side, you can see my top headline there is an H2, but all the subheadings that fall under it in the 2 columns, those are all H3s. One note about the content pieces that are within our flexible content template, the subheadline content type automatically generates an H2 for you. Another tip, highlighting keywords. Make the keywords stand out in some way. I would do this sparingly, but you can use the B button to make text bold, and you can use the I button to italicize. I would avoid using the U button to underline because this makes web text look like it's a link. I would also use italics sparingly because the slanting of the text reduces legibility. My final word on writing for the web. Beautiful and appropriate images can improve the user's mood and comprehension, but don't use clip art. It's usually too goofy, low quality, or overused. I will have more information about that in my Using Imagery screencast. Thank you very much for joining me today.